They could be warnings. In some cases, you might even consider them punishments, spirits doing penance, or making the living do it for them. But most of all, they're inventions. Little stories we tell ourselves to make death less final. Not particularly because we've seen something, but because we want to. We're taught to believe that death is too quiet, too empty, and so we'd rather imagine it filled with footsteps and whispers than accept that it might simply be still, that a life can end just like that. Because, let's be honest for a second here, the idea of silence, a stillness like that, it frightens us more than the idea of ghosts ever could. Across the world, they follow the same rules. Something terrible happens, someone refuses to leave, and the living are left to deal with the aftermath. A woman in white by the river, footsteps on stairs no one uses anymore, a voice that calls your name when no one else is home. Ghosts, we are told, exist because something went wrong. But sometimes I think they exist because something went right, because something loved so deeply it didn't know how to stop, or didn't want to. There is a grave in Freiburg in the old cemetery, where a girl has been sleeping for over a century and a half. She is carved in stone, seemingly caught in the middle of a dream, draped in fabric that will never wrinkle, holding an open book that never closes. Every day, without fail, fresh flowers appear at her side. To this day, people argue about who brings them. Because, as we know, us people like answers. We like names and keys and things we can point to and say, "This explains it." But if you stand there long enough, if you let the quiet settle into your bones for a minute or two, you might start to feel something else. Not fear, not even dread, but warmth. The kind that comes from within and creeps through your entire being. Her name was Caroline Christine Walter. And once, long before she was stone, before she was legend, she was alive. I do not remember the exact moment I began to die. Illness is strange that way. It does not arrive with a big ceremony. It's an uninvited guest, polite at first, almost easy to ignore. It shows in a cough, a fever that comes and goes, a tiredness that sleep itself does not fix. They called it consumption. It gently took you apart piece by piece. I was 16, old enough to understand what was happening, young enough to believe stubbornly that it might spare me. But oh, what a fool I was for believing death himself has the time or sympathy. After all, I was just another young unfortunate soul. One imagines there were many of the likes of myself, suffering a fate similar to mine. What of one more? The windows in my room were tall, and my sister Selma liked to open them in the mornings, even when the air was cold. Especially when the air was cold. Fresh air helps, she said, and it did at some times, anyway. Yet in my case, for my sake, it was a prayer she had learned by heart. I watched the curtains breathe in and out, and I imagined my lungs doing the same. People spoke more softly around me then. Although more often than not, they thought I didn't notice. But I noticed everything. I noticed how my name changed in their mouths, how it became something fragile, how I became something fragile, how conversations stopped when I entered the room, how my mother's hands lingered too long at my shoulders, as if she were memorizing me. And what a helpless feeling that was, having one's mama come to terms with their own daughter's death. If she, who had birthed me and brought life upon me in the first place, gave up on that very thing now, then what hope was left? Truly, and I noticed him, even though he usually never stayed long. Visits were dangerous when illness lingered, and everyone knew it. Still, he came when he could, standing by the door, hat in hand, eyes full of things he did not dare say aloud. Things I perhaps could not have answered. We had plans once, nothing extravagant, just a future that assumed we would both be there to reach it. There had never been much of a reason to assume otherwise. That is the cruelest part of dying young. I think, not the leaving, but the unfinished sentences, the broken promises, the hurt you see in the eyes of family members you were meant to outlive. When the nights finally grew heavier and breathing became a conscious effort, I started dreaming of flowers. Not the ones arranged carefully in vases, but wild ones, growing wherever they pleased, breaking through earth without asking permission. I wondered if I would ever touch them again. And if not, if I would eventually become one of them. A forget-me-not, perhaps. That at least would have been a poetic statement. Death is quiet, at least we've got that right. When I died, there was no thunder, no angels singing. Just a moment where the pain scaffolded its grip, and I realized, almost with surprise, that I was still here. Strangely so, I watched them dress my body. I watched Selma's hands tremble as she smoothed my hair, her tears falling where I could no longer feel them. At least Mama had prepared both herself and me for my inevitable leave. But my sister dear had been too caught up in her delusions, believing that I would have fought this sickness with God by my side, and together we would have defeated this evil called death. But how wrong she had been. My sweet, sweet Selma. For death was not scary, and I was not afraid anymore. I wanted to tell her as much that she herself had not to be. But ghosts, it seems, are better at watching and refuses to die. And as long as the flowers keep coming, I will not be forgotten.